Shalom, everyone. This is Rabbi Bileci. We are live right now, and we are excited for you to join our Hebrew class. So we're just going to jump right in and learn another portion today. We're glad that you could join us on YouTube, like those videos and share them. And also, if you are live on Facebook, we want you to be a part of this wonderful class tonight and learn a little bit of Ivrit, Hebrew. And we look at the Torah portions and look at the significant words in the Hebrew language. So as we jump in tonight and look at Parashat Toldot, we're just thankful that we can study Genesis 25:19 through 28:9. This is called Toldot, which is the Hebrew word we'll learn tonight, significant in the text. All right, so let's jump in and look at this way of writing Hebrew from right to left, whether we're talking about the letters or the pictograph behind these letters, like the letter Aleph, an ox head, or the letter Beit. So think about the letter Beit, and this letter Beit is a Hebrew letter that's a picture of a house, and that gives us the A and B of the alphabet, the Aleph Beit. And also we have the ABG, which is, the ABCs in Hebrew, which is the letter Gimel, a picture of a camel. So let's jump right into this week's portion, which is Parashat Toldot. And we're going to also look at some of the names of the Patriarchs and Matriarchs of Israel. All right. So this is going to be great as we jump into the Aleph Beit with its 22 consonant letters, where the Aleph equals a picture of a house. An Aleph equals a picture of an ox head, which is in Hebrew Aleph, or the letter Beit, a picture of a house, which is in Hebrew Bait. The Gimel is a camel, or Gamal, and Dalet is a picture of a door, which in Hebrew is Delet. So let's go ahead and start with our Aleph Beit and look at how these letters that are pictographs, all 22 of them, can be counted 5 letters at a time. And as we count, we take a little breath in between those 5, and we jump right in with the first one, Aleph, and we'll finish with Hey, and you'll take a breath, okay? So let's go ahead and start at the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Aleph, Beit, Gimel, Dalet, Hey. Vav, Zain, Chet, Tet, Yud. Khaf, Lamed, Mem, Nun, Samech. Ein, Peh, Tzaddi, Kuf, Resh. Last 2. Shin, Tav. Right, so that's our Aleph Beit with 22 letters. Half of them can be used as a prefix, but a language that has 22 consonant letters, where we take one consonant plus a vowel and have an open syllable, or with an extra closing consonant, we can have C plus V plus C equaling a closed syllable. The C is a consonant letter, one of the 22, and then we use the A, E, I, O, and U, pronounced A, E, O, U, as vowels. This is a Nikkud vocalization. So if we think of the way Hebrew works when it comes to vowels, if you're looking in the Torah, you only have vowel indicators that can have various sounds, like the Aleph, the Hey, the Vav, the Yud, and the Ein. And the only way to know this is with this Nikkud vocalization. It indicates that the Aleph here in yellow for Ima, mommy, has a dot underneath it for the I vowel, Ima. We talked about Parshat Chaye Sarah last week, and we understood that she is the Imenu, our mother. She is Ima, mommy, of the faith of Abraham. So that is the wife of Abraham, and therefore she's our spiritual mother. So Sarah is her name, and her name, Sarah, the letter Shin or Sin, the Resh, and the Hey. The Hey in yellow is the H at the end of Sarah, and is silent but holds the place of a vowel preceding it. The T-looking symbol, kamatz, is a long ah sound. Just like in the word shalom, with the same sheen that is spelled with spelling name Sarah, instead of the dot being on the left for Sarah, making it an S, the dot is on its original right side above that letter sheen, and that indicates that if it's on the right way to say it is sheen. And we spell shalom with this letter, and this dot has to be on the right side for it to be an SH, versus the dot on the left is an S sound for Sarah, Sarah. So shalom uses a vav for the O sound by putting a dot on top of it. And we say, oh, look at that bird in the air. And it reminds us of that vav. It's like, looks like a elongated hand or a person lifting up the dot for the O that should be in the air, like when you see a bird or a plane in the air. So we also have the letter Yud in the contraction of Shem and Ani, name and the pronoun I, to mean my name, Shmi, Shmi. So that is Shem and Ani contracted to give us Shmi, and the Yud is holding the vowel preceding it. And so we see that is elongating that I vowel, the same I we saw in Ima, but in this case it's a long I, and it's Shmi, Shmi. And then we have the last one that's a vowel indicator, which is Ein, which we actually have the word Ein, which is the first letter of the word Ein, which is an eye or a fountain, and it's the 16th letter in Hebrew. So that is the letter there in yellow, and then we see that all these letters really give us a way to understand how to use the Nikkud vocalization. So where do we find these dots and dashes, these dottings of the Nikkud vocalization? We find it underneath, reading from right to left, or we see it to the left of the letter. So we look for it underneath, and we don't see anything underneath as a marking point. We write it to the left as we're reading from right to left. The example would be shalom. Where is the vowel? Underneath the letter sheen, and we have underneath the letter sheen a kamatz, giving us a long ah sound. Ah, ah, ah. The example would be what you see here. This would be ah, ah, long ah. So we see in shalom we have a lamed next for the consonant that would equal L, and then we have a vav with a dot on top. Now remember, we talked about the vav with the dot on top. So we said that if there's a vav that is normally a V in English, has a dot on top, it is an O sound, right? So we see that that would be an L and an O, and then we have a special letter at the end for the M of shalom, the L-O-M of shalom. Sha being open, there in yellow, lom, closing the mouth, therefore it's a closed syllable. So the mem is a special mem, one of 5 special letters at the end of a word. 5 of our letters in Hebrew have a different look. Khaf, backwards looking C, with a dot in the center called dagesh, gives us a K sound. Without the dagesh, it's a KH or CH in transliteration for instead of k. So we have the K sound k for Khaf, and we have the KH or CH for Khaf. And at the end of the word, it's Feh Sofit, looking a little different. Mem would be the second option there of 5 Sofit letters, and that has a different look, more boxed in than the normal mem on the left. We see a Mem Sofit on the right. And that's what we're going to use for this word. We also see Nun and Nun Sofit when we said Ein. Ein has a Nun Sofit at the end for the final N, or Nun. So we also found out that Aleph, the letter Pheh, is a strong P with the dagesh, the dot in the center. Without it, it becomes PH or F in transliteration for Pheh. And then Feh Sofit, a different look at the end. And we saw that when we looked at the meaning of Aleph. Aleph. Look at the Feh Sofit at the end of Aleph. Now, if you're thinking that Aleph sounds a lot like Greek, well, that's where the Greeks got alpha from in the Semitic tongue of Hebrew, also shared by those who speak Aramaic and Arabic. We see a similarity in the letter Aleph, and you see alpha with an extra A at the end. Like the letter Beit would be to the Greeks beta, or in modern Greek vita with a V sound. And Gimel, now if you're part of a fraternity or sorority, you start hearing the similarity of these Greek words that sound like Hebrew. Gamma is like Gimel. And then last, Dalet, like the Greek letter delta, both being a triangle showing their connection. A triangle in Hebrew, in Paleo-Hebrew, and the capital delta would also be a triangle. So we see that Shalom uses a Mem Sofit at the end, and that would give us the transliteration Shalom, which is translated peace, but it really means wholeness. And we greet each other saying Shalom, Shalom, with a double portion of that wholeness or peace. Especially when we get to Friday, we start saying Shabbat Shalom for the peace of the Sabbath, as well as asking you, how is your peace today? Try this one. Mashlomcha for a man, and mashlomech for a woman. So look at the suffix for shalom. Ma is what? Shalom is peace. We shorten the vowel a little bit to say shlom, and then we say cha for your, for a male, as we think of the masculine singular suffix for you. And then ech would be the feminine singular suffix for you, for a female. So we ask mashlom cha for a man, mashlom ech for a woman. Mashlom ech, mashlom cha. So to let you know who you're talking to, a male or a female. And if you just want to be simple, you can say manishma. What have we heard? What's being heard on the street? What's up? So Boker Tov will greet someone in the morning. I say Boker Tov to India, South Africa, Australia, all those people that are enjoying the morning time right now, and we're in the evening preparing for nighttime, and Erev Tov would be evening for those in my time zone. And tonight we'll close saying Laila Tov. All right, so let's take a look at what we learned last week. We talked about Chaye Sarah last week and talked about family vocabulary, and we understood that family vocabulary is based upon what we call mishpacha. Mishpacha is family. Family. So we learned various things regarding the family. So we learned, for instance, about Av being father, Em being mother, or the more intimate way to say it is Ima, with the Aramaic aleph at the end for a suffix at the end, Ima for mommy or my mother. And then Av, you can either say Avi for my father, or just like Ima, we can say with an Aramaic suffix, Abba, Abba. We also learned how to say your father, Avicha, or a woman would say, or we would refer to a woman's father as Avich, Avich, your father, feminine singular, versus Avicha for masculine singular. And then plural, we found out it's Avinu, like when we say Avinu Malkeinu, our father, our king. So we see Avinu Malkeinu, our father, our king. And this is all part of Mishpocha or Mishpacha. And the father and mother might have a son, Ben, or a daughter, Bat. So now this week we see more of the family of Mishpocha being developed. So we're going to look at Parashat Toldot and the names of the patriarchs and matriarchs. So let's read it in the Tree of Life version, Genesis 25:19. Now these are the genealogies, this version says, of Isaac, Abraham's son, and Abraham fathered Isaac. So verse 20 says, Isaac was 40 years old when he took for himself Rebekah, and she is the daughter of Betuel, the Aramaean. Remember Aramaic? The Aramaean, and he was from Padan Aram, the sister of Lavan or Laban, the Aramaean, to be his wife. These terms like Aramaean is referring to territory, not so much to lineage. So if we look at the text in Hebrew, it says, Ve'ele Toldot Yitzhak. Ve'ele Toldot Yitzhak. Now who is Yitzhak? He is the son, Ben Avraham. So we see that Ve'ele Toldot Yitzhak, And Toldot means generations, or is translated genealogies. Generations or genealogies. So, Ve'ele Toldot Yitzhak. Yitzhak ben Avraham. Isaac, the son of Abraham. And then it says, Avraham holidet Yitzhak. So notice two ways to describe who is Isaac, if there was any question. Yitzhak ben Avraham. Avraham holidet Yitzhak. Now, what does this mean? Here we have Isaac, the son of Abraham, but then it goes on to say Abraham bore Isaac. In other words, if there was any question about who the father was, or whether she could produce a child, Sarah, at 90 and Abraham at 100, this is the Torah's way of reaffirming us. No, this is Isaac, Abraham's son, Yitzhak ben Avraham, and Avraham holidet Yitzhak, that Abraham did bear Isaac. Because remember, there was an issue with Ishmael and Hagar. So the Torah wants to clarify. Now, let's first talk about Avraham for a minute. So when we talk about Avraham, I want you to notice the name is different from Avram by one letter. Okay? So we're going to start with first Aleph. Aleph, which is the picture of an ox head. We're going to add the letter Beit, but without the Dagesh, this picture of a house, put it together and make the father. Because who is the head or strength of the house or family? You put those two letters together, it's the father who's the head of the house or the strength of the house and bands the house together. This is why the English word from German influence, we have husband, which is house band. He bands the house together. Now, you might be more familiar with Abba, because the Bible says through the spirit of adoption in Messiah, we cry, Abba, Father. In other words, whether you're Jewish or not, your spirit cries out in Hebrew to say he's Abba, Father. So we see he is Abba, which is daddy. He is the source of all things. And when we take Av, which means father, and add Ram, which means exalted, we get Avram. Abram in English, Avram in Hebrew, two words contracted to mean exalted father, Avram. Now, what does God do to change his name to Avraham? Well, notice I have circled in red the letter He. And this is the first letter of God's name that God says you can have this name as a covenant. The name of God is Yud He Vav He. We are taking the letter He, the first He, and giving that name in covenant to Avraham, to turn him from an exalted father to a father of many nations, or a multitude. And only God can do a miracle like that. Take a 100-year-old man and have him produce a son, Isaac, that will produce nations, or that will cause nations to be spiritually adopted by faith to Abraham, like Gentiles being engrafted in to Israel's vine or tree. So this letter He is the picture of a window. So what was this window of heaven open for Abraham? God blessed him from heaven with a son. He also gave him a revelation from heaven and opened up the windows of heaven to bless him, to be a blessing. And he would curse anyone that wanted to curse Abraham, which is why Balaam the false prophet, we call him Bilam, could not curse what God had already blessed, because he told Abraham, when he was Abram, I'll bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you. Why? Because I'm going to make your name great, which literally means I'm going to enlarge your name. I'm going to make your name famous. I'm going to enlarge it. It's going to have greater influence. So as exalted father, Avram, that was great. But when I give you my letter that opens up a window of revelation to you, you will see the revelation that you'll be a father to nations. You will be a father and a blessing to all the families of the earth and all the nations of the earth. Avraham, that's a covenant God made with Abraham. Now, he couldn't just make the covenant with his wife as Avram to become Avraham without changing her name. So look what he does. He takes the letter that is his first letter, Yud, and says, that belongs to me. So her name, Sarai, can be translated my prince or my leader, we learned last week. And so the letter Yud, he says, we're going to remove that letter Yud because I'm the only one that has a hand, that has the power to give you the miracle, to give you the child you want, and to make you blessed along with your husband Abraham. So I'm going to take this letter Yud, which means an open hand, like God's open hand of blessing and his open hand that created all things, and the hand that formed us from the ground and made us a clay vessel that he could use. This hand, like the first letter for God's name, Yud He Vav He, this hand is God's mighty hand. Oh man, when you think about the hand of God on your life, when you think about the hand of God saying, Sarai, you have royalty in your blood. You are a leader, but your husband's been calling you my prince or my leader. And that's why he slept with Hagar, because he was following your lead when he needs to be the leader. I need to take him from Abraham, who's supposed to be an exalted father, who without a son needs to become Abraham. More than just a uncle and a spiritual father to Lot, he needs to have his own son from your womb. So I must also open up your womb as a window of blessing, just like I open up the windows of heaven for you, and I'll remove the letter Yud from your name Sarai and put the letter He, which is the same place I put it in my name, Yud He Vav He. So the second He at the end of God's name becomes the He at the end of Sarah's name, so that now they're in covenant. Now I want to show you something that is miraculous. Her name, first of all, starts with the letter Shin, but with the dot on the left, it's pronounced Sin for Sarah, but it's followed by the letter Resh, and we found out that together, that is a powerful, powerful name. We're going to find out exactly the change and what God was doing, because see, we found out her name means prince, Sar, but in the form of her name. Remember last week we talked about Chaye Sarah, and we talked about Chaye Sarah meaning the lives of Sarah, and Chaye is plural, Chaye, lives of, from the word Chai, life. And we said the text in Torah says Shnei Chaye Sarah, the two lives of Sarah, because she was Sarai in the first part of her life, and then she was Sarah. What's the purpose of the name change? The root Sar means a head person of rank or class, captain that had rule, a chief or captain, general, governor, keeper, lord, or taskmaster, prince or principal, ruler or steward. So if she is the prince, if she's being called my head person, my person of rank or class, my captain who rules over me, my chief, my captain, my general, my governor, my keeper, instead of him being the exalted father, then Avram will stay Avram and he'll never become Avraham, taking the first He of his name, which gives him authority in God's name to do what he needed to do, to train up his children, to teach them the way of the Lord, and to make sure that all of us become his spiritual sons by the spirit of adoption, crying Abba Father, as we walk in the footsteps of Abraham as Avraham Avinu. So this is powerful that he must do the same thing when he takes that letter He, removes the Yud, and adds this window of revelation to Sarai so she can become Sarah, princess, which makes her name feminine and more submissive because the He is at the end, while the name Avraham has it before. But I want to show you something you may not even know. These two letters of He, or the two H's that is now present in their new names, has a Vav in between. And the Vav is a hook, which shows the hook or joining of their marriage and ministry, and their future and their passions and their desires and their goals. What if every husband and wife could be hooked together by this letter Vav, the sixth letter in Hebrew, which actually can be a picture of man also, because mankind needs to be joined together in unity. And so when you look at the name of God, Yud, that letter that means hand, and He, that means a window, to behold, a revelation. Both Avraham taking the first hay and Sarah taking the second hay are hooked together in perfect unity now and joined with God in covenant. So God is now clarifying his covenant by hooking those two name changes together, those new nature and character together, because what good is it for the man to be new and the wife to not be renewed also? And because of that, they were able to take on this new verb of action, yalad, because when you look at this statement, Avram holid Yitzhak. So this here, holid et Yitzhak, holid comes from yalad, to give birth and bear children. Remember, Sarah was going to have Isaac, but as Sarai, she was leading, she was in control, and she told her husband to sleep with Hagar. But now Abraham has a new nature, and Sarah has a new nature by a new name, and now they're able to yalad, which is the root to give birth or bear children. The actual infinitive form is yaledet. The infinitive form in the pa'al form to give birth or bear children is yaledet. But the root yalad means to bear young, causatively, to, or even medically, here to act as a midwife. So even to help someone bear children. So we see bringing forth children is very important within the Jewish world because that's how they're going to be fruitful and multiply. From yalad, we get the word yeled, boy, and boys would be yeladim. And for girl, we have a form yalda. So instead of yeled, we have yalda. So we know childhood is yaldut, childhood. Or your homeland and motherland, a land of one's birth, is called moledet. Now, remember, their child was Yitzhak. That means he laughed. And we found out that Yitzhak is named Yitzhak because it's not she laughed, but he laughed, because in Genesis 17:17, it says, Then Abraham fell on his face and laughed, and he said in his heart, Will a son be born to an 100-year-old man? Or will Sarah, who is 90 years old, give birth? But remember, this is the chapter in chapter 17 of that new covenant that God promised. If I change your name, I'm going to change your nature. Therefore, you're going to have that son, Yitzhak, because God's going to get the last laugh. He laughed. But ultimately, because Abraham laughed, God had to prove to him that I'm going to get the last laugh. So I'm going to have you name the child Yitzhak, which means he laughed. And Yitzhak has Jacob or Yaakov. And Yaakov does not mean deceiver. I heard a good minister of God mean well, but say something that was incorrect. He says, wow, Sarah named her son Yitzhak, but Rebecca named her son Deceiver. And I thought to myself, this can't be. What mother would name their child Deceiver? The root meaning is hand on heel or heel catcher, because the letter Yud, which is the picture of a hand, was added to the word Akev, which means heel. Together, Akev and the Yud becomes Yaakov, hand on heel or heel catcher. That's all it means. It doesn't mean deceiver. He didn't become a deceiver till later in life because he was kind of trained by his mother to deceive his father, but he also had some manipulation in convincing his brother that he should give up his birthright. Now, really, it was a business transaction that Esau agreed to. But nonetheless, Jacob was a heel catcher. He knew the word of the Lord in the womb, that the older would serve the younger, because there was 2 nations in Rebekah's womb. So let's talk about the matriarchs for a minute. Sarah, we found out, means princess, Sarah, and Rebecca is Rivka, which means to join or tie together. So interesting. like a threefold cord hard to be broken. Even for Isaac, Yitzhak, she tied him together. She bound him together. He was falling apart, and she was like the glue that pulled them together. It means to literally team oxen or join or yoke them together. And that's interesting that the first marriage described in the Bible with a veil is based upon Rivka covering her face when she sees her future husband, Yitzhak or Isaac. So join or tied together is the meaning of the word. We actually find in the Talmud the word rivakot, which means to team oxen, rivakot, from Rivka. Rivakot is the plural feminine form there, to team oxen, to join together, to bind together, be yoked together in marriage. So Rachel, Rachel, and Leah also have meanings. Rachel, which is the sister that Jacob wanted to marry, but instead he marries Leah first, and then he marries Rachel, has to work an extra 7 years for that second marriage. And in those days there wasn't any laws against what we now call polygamy. There just wasn't any Torah instructions yet, because the Torah is going to recount the patriarchs and matriarchs and tell us what probably didn't work out so well and what we shouldn't do or repeat again. That's the instructions of the Torah. So we see that Rachel means a ewe or a female sheep, and Leah or Leah means weary, grieved, impatient, and exhausted. She was probably exhausted from her husband staring at Rachel all day, who was a shepherdess taking care of those sheep. So she was not only a female shepherd, her name means a female sheep, a ewe. So you can see where the story and the plot thickens. All right, so let's talk about Rivka, and she has 2 children in her womb. She has Jacob, the heel catcher, who has his hand on Esau, or his name in Hebrew, Esav. Esav means already made, because he was hairy. Already made. Genesis 25:25 says, "Now the first came out reddish. All of him was like a fur coat, and they named him Esau, which means already made." He also gets the nickname for being reddish as Edom or Edom, from Adom, red. Like Adam, Adam, and Adamah, man made from red clay of the ground, or the dust of the ground. So we see that his name, Esau, in Hebrew is Esav. Try that. Esav, and it comes from asa, to make, fashion, or do. So he was already made. Already made, again from the root asa. In fact, we get the song, "Oh, say shalom bimroma, hu yaseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, v'imru imru amen." Oh, say shalom means to make peace, because asa, the root, means to make or to fashion or to do. So to make peace is oseh shalom. Shouldn't we all be peacemakers in a world that we're living that has so much political tension and political unrest and racism, and anti-Semitism? We need some shalom makers today. We need some people that are an oseh shalom, someone who makes peace. And from the word dor, generation, the official word generation, similar to how we translate toldot, which we can translate as generation, speaking of the action of creating a genealogy or having children, just like it says, Holid et Yitzhak. Holid et Yitzhak. Holid from Yalad is also where we get Tolda or Toldot. Toldot is plural for Tolda, which is from the same root, Yalad. The Yud drops, a Tav is added, and we get Toldot from this root. So when we think of the actual noun generation, it's Dor, and the Bible tells us, Dor vador, from generation to generation, his mercy continues to endure. Amen. So we're grateful that you have joined us on this Hebrew hunt of this text of Parashat Toldot, where we've also looked at some of the names of the patriarchs and matriarchs for this portion. And let's see if we can also jump in, take a look at the versions that we use on the internet. You can use BibleGateway.com, and blueletterbible.org is a great resource to learn the Hebrew. even as we look at the text here. Ve'ele Toldot Yitzhak. Let's take a look at that. Good to have Renee and Patricia on from the synagogue with us. All right. So we have Ve'ele, right? We have Toldot Yitzhak. Okay, so Ve'ele Toldot Yitzhak. These are the generations or the genealogy of Isaac, as it says here in the New King James. And it says here, Bin Avraham, he's the son of Abraham, but it says Avraham holid et Yitzhak, that Abraham begets or bears Isaac. So now, when we think about Abraham, we found out here with Abraham that he is going to be a father of many nations in Genesis 17:5. He goes on to tell him that you're going to have descendants after you throughout your generation that will keep the covenant. And then he also tells him, Sarah, your wife, she's got to have a name change to Sarah. And we see that he's confused on how that can happen because he's laughing because she's 90 and he's 100. So Abraham said to God, oh, that Ishmael might live before me. Remember Ishmael. So that's from Hagar, the Egyptian concubine or handmaiden of Sarah. So you can basically use these as great ways to look up the Hebrew and understand what's going on in the text. Like it says here, your wife, Sarah. So we have Sarai, and then we have Sarah. So that is a name change for that matriarch. All right. Let's see if not sure if we have any questions from our Zoom audience. I know we have a few on from the synagogue, Renee and Patricia. I know they're usually silent partners on there. And we don't have our friends from India on tonight. I'm sure they will watch later. All right, so if we don't have any questions from you guys, we'll go ahead and finish our final thoughts of the night. So, as you learn this Torah portion, as you consider not only matriarchs and patriarchs and how important it is to honor your father and your mother, but we should also learn from them because we learn from their miracles as well as their mistakes. The miracle of producing Isaac, even though Sarah was barren when she was Sarai, now she's Sarah. She's no longer the leader in the house. She's the princess. She still has that leadership quality, but she's more submissive, taking on that letter He from God's name, Yud He Vav He, that we call the tetragrammaton, or the sacred name of God, the ineffable name of God. Many times not even pronounced within the Jewish community, but instead we say Adonai, which means Lord or Master, and we also use Hashem, like Baruch Hashem, blessed be the name of the Lord. I also want to encourage you that as we continue to study, you're going to find in the Torah some generational curses that develop. But we should always focus on the fact that God never made us for curses. He made us for blessing. Abraham, you're blessed to be a blessing. And I will curse those who curse you. So for the believer today, if you're a spiritual son or daughter of Abraham and Sarah, Avraham Avinu, and Sarah Imenu, then you should be blessed because you have the blessing of Abraham. You should not be cursed. But you might need to acknowledge, as I'll teach this weekend, don't miss this Saturday. I'm going to talk about the generational blessings that overcome curses. And I'm going to teach you how to break generational curses. I'm going to tell you how to walk in the blessing of God, which eliminates and overcomes any curse through the ear gate and eye gate that you see and you hear in your family line. And sadly enough, in some way or another, we choose to walk in the ways and the sins of our forefathers and our mothers. We need to also learn how to walk in the blessings of our forefathers. And if we have to go all the way back to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and meditate in the Torah day and night so we can study not only the good and the bad, but also the ugly of things that they did that they regret, but also learn from the things that they did that honored God. Blessing for obedience, cursing for disobedience. That Torah of instruction gives us the Deuteronomy 28, blessing and cursing. And there's more blessing in following in obedience than disobedience that brings multiple curses and affects even childbearing. It affects marriages, and it causes people to feel like they can have affairs, and it causes people to steal and to cheat and to rob and defraud and to even have mental anguish and anxiety and self-esteem issues. And you have some of these things that could be hints to generational curses in your family. This weekend, I'm going to talk about what really is a generational curse, how it can be broken over your life, and how in Yeshua the Messiah, he came and died, cursed on a tree so we could break the curse that not the Torah brings, but our sin or disobedience to God's Torah brings. And you're going to learn how to walk free from any curse, but to walk freely in the blessing of God as you walk in the footsteps of Messiah, the footsteps of Moses, the footsteps of Abraham, Avraham Avinu, and really walk in obedience before God and honor him with all you think, you say, and you do. That's a lesson for all of us. May we all learn from God's Torah and walk in the footsteps of Messiah. All right, guys, I'm ready to close out tonight. If you have enjoyed tonight, I say Laila Tov, or still Boker Tov if it's morning time for you. And I pray a blessing over you. We're going to go ahead and finish with the Aharonic benediction. Stretch your hands for the blessing. Yivrechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha, Ye'er Adonai panav elecha v'nihuneka, Yisa Adonai v'lecha, v'asim lecha shalom. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May he shine his face upon you, be gracious to you, and may he lift up his countenance upon you and give you perfect peace. And Sar Shalom, the Prince of Peace. In the name of Yeshua the Messiah, we pray. B'Shem Yeshua. Amen. All right. Laila Tov, everyone. Lehitrot. See you next time.